My name is Nora Ellison, and if I'm being honest, I didn't think I'd make it to 30. Not because of anything tragic or medical, but because I was disappearing, slowly, quietly, beneath the weight of a life I no longer recognized. Was successful on paper, praised in emails, admired from across boardrooms. But inside, I was hollowed out, just noise behind glass. So one day, without telling anyone, I left. No note, no apology. Just keys on the kitchen counter and my phone in a drawer. I drove until I didn't recognize the roads anymore. And when the mountains grew close enough to swallow the sky, I stopped. The cabin was old, quiet, and lonely in a way that felt like mercy. It smelled like wood smoke and forgotten stories. The roof leaked. The wind whistled through cracks in the walls. But it was mine. And for the first time in years, I breathed. The first few days passed like I was shedding a second skin. My shoulders ached from the weight I no longer carried. The silence at first was deafening. No pings, no emails, no hollow congratulations. Just wind through pine trees and the occasional groan of old floorboards. Then came the rain. Not a gentle drizzle, but a full, angry downpour that started in the middle of the night, like the sky had finally had enough. I stood by the window, mug in hand, watching water sheet down the glass. Thunder rolled through the mountains, shaking the little cottage like a warning. That's when I first saw him. He stood just beyond the fence line. A massive, dark shape against the trees. At first, I thought it was a bear. My pulse kicked. I stepped back from the window, heart in my throat. But then the lightning flashed, and I saw him clearly. A dog, huge, soaked to the bone, watching me. His eyes locked with mine. And something in them made me forget to breathe. He didn't bark. He didn't move. Just stood there, ears pinned, fur dripping, like a statue carved from rain. I don't know how long we stared at each other, but when the next thunderclap came, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the forest was quiet again. I checked the yard, no paw prints, no sign of him at all. Maybe I imagined him. Maybe my mind, finally unraveling, conjured up a ghost in the shape of a dog. But that afternoon, I found a trail of muddy prints on the back porch. He'd come closer. I should have been scared. A giant stray dog? Alone in the woods? But instead, I felt curious. He hadn't tried to hurt me, hadn't growled or charged. He just stood there, watching. Like he was waiting for something, I left a bowl of water out by the steps. It was gone by morning. The next day, I added a piece of chicken. That was gone too. By the fourth day, I saw him again, closer this time. Still soaked, still silent, but no longer a ghost. He was real, and he was watching me with eyes that looked too human for comfort. I opened the door. He didn't move. I stepped out, slowly, hands visible, heart pounding. "Hey," I whispered. "You lost?" He tilted his head, ears twitching. I crouched, careful, not to make sudden movements. "You hungry?" He didn't come closer, but he didn't leave either. I set the food down gently and backed away. He waited until I was inside before he ate. This became our routine. Every day, a little closer. Every evening, I found muddy paw prints on the porch, and slowly I began to speak to him. I didn't expect a reply, but it felt good to hear a voice again, even if it was just my own. "You're a strange one," I told him one morning as I sipped coffee and watched him lie in the sun near the steps. "You act like you're guarding me." He didn't look up, just let out a long, low sigh. I named him Bear. Not just because of his size, though he was massive, easily outweighing me by 50 pounds, but because he had that quiet strength about him. Like nothing rattled him, like he'd seen everything and decided to stay anyway. Eventually, he let me touch him. The first time, my hand trembled as I reached out. He didn't move, just blinked slowly, as if giving permission. His fur was thick and coarse, still matted from rain, but under my fingers, he was warm. Real. Solid. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd touched anything without hesitation. After that, he started sleeping near the porch, then on it. Then, one night, during a sudden cold snap, right by the door. I opened it. He stepped in. Just like that. No growl, no panic. Just a heavy, quiet presence beside me as I sat by the fireplace, listening to the crackle of flames and my own heartbeat. It was the first time in months I didn't feel alone. I'd talk, and he'd listen, his big head tilted like he understood every word. I told him about the city, the burnout, the faces that smiled while draining the life out of me. I told him about the boyfriend who said I was too intense, the boss who said I was brilliant but exhausting, and the mother who still didn't understand why I'd left it all behind. Bear just sat beside me, still and warm. I think that's when I started to heal. The forest became my rhythm. Mornings with coffee and birdsong. Afternoons tending the small garden. Evenings by the fire with Bear's heavy head resting on my feet. I stopped checking the calendar, stopped counting days. I was starting to feel like myself again, whoever that was. Then came the fog, thick, white, endless. It rolled in one morning, without warning, blanketing everything. I couldn't see past the trees. Sound felt muffled, distant. Even Bear seemed uneasy, his ears perked, his body tense. I should have stayed inside, but the quiet had turned sharp, like a knife on glass. I wanted air, just a short walk, just enough to clear my head. Bear tried to block the door, literally stood in front of it, unmoving. "Move," I said gently. "It's fine." He didn't budge. "I'll be quick." Still, nothing. I had to slide past him. The forest, once comforting, now felt strange. The fog distorted everything, turned branches into monsters and shadows into whispers. I followed the familiar trail, but even that felt unfamiliar now. I didn't see the route. My foot caught. The ground vanished. I fell hard. Pain exploded up my ankle, sharp and hot. My wrist twisted beneath me, and my head slammed the dirt. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The forest tilted. The sky spun. Then, a thud. Heavy. Close. I opened my eyes. He was on top of me. Bear. His massive paws on either side of my shoulders, his breath hot on my face, his eyes wide and frantic. He'd followed me. He'd seen me fall. And now, he was shielding me like his life depended on it. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. His weight wasn't crushing, but it was real. Solid. Grounding. Bear hovered above me like a silent sentinel, his massive body blocking out the fog and the fear. His chest heaved, hot air brushing across my cheek as he leaned down, nose twitching, eyes wide and frantic. One paw touched my shoulder gently, and I flinched. He pulled back. And that tiny movement undid me. I let out a sound, half sob, half breath, and dropped my head back against the earth. My ankle throbbed in jagged waves. My wrist felt wrong. Not broken, maybe, but screaming in protest every time I shifted. I blinked against the sharpness in my eyes. "I'm okay," I whispered. "I think I'm okay." Bear didn't move. He was still hovering, eyes darting across my face, as if checking me for damage he couldn't fix. "Hey," I breathed, reaching up with my good hand to touch the side of his face. You don't have to sit on me, big guy. He finally shifted, stepping off me with surprising grace. But he didn't go far, just stood over me, close enough that I could still feel the weight of his concern. He nosed at my shoulder, then my knee, then sniffed my ankle and let out a low, concerned whine. Yeah, I muttered through clenched teeth. That one's not great. I tried to sit up. Pain lanced through my leg, and I gasped, grabbing at the nearest branch for balance. My vision swam for a second. The fog pressed close, wrapping the forest in a wet, white silence. Panic nudged at the edge of my mind. I shouldn't have come out here, I murmured. Stupid. Bear nosed at my arm again. I know, I sighed. I know. I looked around. The cabin wasn't far. I could still see the outline of the trail if I squinted hard enough. But every step would be a fight. I wasn't even sure I could stand. My body trembled from the shock, the pain, the cold that was starting to settle. And then Bear did something I didn't expect. He stepped behind me and sat, his huge frame pressing against my back. Then, slowly, he leaned forward, nudging his chest beneath my arm, lifting just enough to support some of my weight, like he wanted me to lean on him. I stared at him, stunned. You're serious? He looked up at me with those quiet, steady eyes. And I knew. He wasn't going to leave me. Not now. Not ever. With effort, I managed to brace myself on my good leg, my injured foot barely touching the ground. Bear stood steady beside me, muscles taut and waiting. I leaned into him, wrapping one arm around his neck, the other gripping a low branch for support. Okay, I whispered. Let's go slow. We moved in inches. Bear adjusted with every step, pausing when I did, shifting when I swayed. I couldn't stop the occasional gasp or curse, but I didn't fall again, not with him there. The fog thickened as we moved, swallowing sound, muting the world. But Bear was a living guidepost, warm, solid, dependable. I'd never trusted anything so instinctively in my life. By the time the cabin came into view, I was sweating from the effort and shaking with relief. I collapsed on the porch, gasping, head resting against the doorframe. Bear sat beside me, panting slightly, watching me like a hawk. You're incredible, I whispered. You know that? He didn't move, just let out a soft huff and pressed his nose to my knee. Eventually, I managed to crawl inside and get to the couch. Bear followed me in and lay at my feet like he belonged there, which, at that point, he did. I wrapped my swollen ankle in a dish towel and propped it on a pillow. My wrist, I simply cradled against my chest. I didn't have a phone to call for help. No internet, no emergency contacts. Just me. And Bear. Oddly enough, I wasn't scared. I fell asleep with my hand buried in his fur. The next few days were a blur of pain and quiet companionship. I couldn't walk well, but Bear stayed close. He fetched the towel when it slipped off my ankle. He nudged the blanket over me when I got cold. He even barked once, low and sharp, when I tried to get up too quickly. You're bossy, I told him with a smirk. He licked my fingers in reply. I talked more, now that I was stuck in one place. Maybe it was the cabin fever. Maybe it was the strange comfort of being listened to without judgment. Whatever the reason, I found myself telling Bear everything. About my childhood. About the art scholarship I turned down to take a real job. About the man who said he loved me, then ghosted me the day before our engagement party. About the panic attacks I hid behind productivity. About the girl I used to be. Wild, messy, alive. She's still in there, I whispered one night. my fingers tangled in Bear's ruff. But I don't think she remembers how to get out. Bear let out a deep, contented sigh and placed his giant head in my lap. I think that was his way of saying he saw her, that he remembered. A week passed before I could put weight on my foot again. Every wobbly step was shadowed by Bear, who hovered close enough to catch me if I stumbled. He was like a ghost-turned guardian, ever present, ever patient, and I began to wonder. Who had left him? He wore no collar, no chip as far as I could tell. His coat had scars beneath the fur, and sometimes in his sleep he whined, low and mournful, like he was chasing something he'd lost. Had someone abandoned him? Hurt him? Forgotten he existed? The thought made my throat ache. One morning, as we sat on the porch watching the mist burn away, I said softly, "If someone did that to you, they didn't deserve you." Bear didn't react. I reached down and scratched behind his ear. But I do. He leaned into the touch, and I knew he understood. It wasn't until mid-October that I saw the flyer. I'd gone into town, limping but mobile for supplies. The local store was small, run by an older couple who barely looked up when I entered. But near the register, something caught my eye. A missing dog poster. Large black shepherd mix. Scar above left eye. Last seen 6 months ago near Forest Creek. Bear. My heart thudded in my chest. The contact number was local. A woman's name, Elise Marlowe. I stood there for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my fingers. Someone had lost him. Someone might be looking for him. But what if he didn't want to be found? When I returned to the cabin, Bear was waiting at the edge of the clearing, tail swaying gently. I sat beside him in the grass and whispered, "Do you remember Elise?" His ears twitched. "I found your poster." He didn't move, just looked at me with those deep, steady eyes. "What do you want me to do, Bear?" No answer, just the wind, rustling through pine needles. "I need to know what you want." That night, I didn't sleep, and Bear didn't leave my side. I didn't call the number. I couldn't. Maybe that made me selfish, but the thought of someone coming, to take Bear away, of this cabin without the soft thump of his tail, the quiet snore at night, the way his eyes met mine like they understood things no one else ever had, it gutted me. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was mine. And I was beginning to believe I was his. Still, the guilt gnawed at me. What if someone out there cried for him every night? What if he'd been ripped from a home where he was just as loved? But when I tried to imagine that, some warm house with kids and laughter and a woman named Elise calling out to him, it didn't feel real. Bear didn't carry himself like a dog who'd been nurtured. He was too quiet, too watchful, too haunted in his sleep. He'd been through something. I knew that now, and maybe I had too. Maybe that's why we understood each other. It was a week after I saw the flyer when the fall came. Not a physical one, at least. Not yet. But a fall of another kind. Emotionally, I hit a wall. I woke that morning to frost glazing the grass. The cabin's windows fogged over from the cold. My ankle throbbed with every step. I burned my hand on the kettle. I dropped my coffee. Then, I sat in the middle of the floor and cried. Not a few polite tears, but an unraveling. I cried for everything. For the city I'd run from. For the person I used to be. For the girl who kept performing because she thought love was something you had to earn. For the man who told me I was too much. And the boss who said I needed to be handled. For my mother's silence. For the version of myself I had silenced to please them all, and for Bear, because I didn't know if I'd have the strength to do what might be right if someone came looking for him. He came to me quietly, didn't bark, didn't whine, just pressed his head into my shoulder and stood there, solid and warm, and with me. I buried my face in his fur. "I'm not okay," I whispered. He stayed. Later that afternoon, I tried to push myself. I walked farther than I should have. Through the trees, past the clearing where Bear liked to sunbathe, and down a slope that opened up into a rocky ravine. My ankle ached, but I needed the movement, needed to feel something other than the weight of my thoughts. Bear followed, of course, a silent shadow at my side. There was a stream at the bottom, not wide but fast, slick with melting ice and dead leaves. I sat on a flat stone and watched it flow, my thoughts spinning as wildly as the current. I didn't hear the crack until I felt it. The rock beneath me shifted. In an instant, I was sliding. I reached out, grabbing for anything, but my injured wrist screamed in protest and my fingers slipped. The slope wasn't high, but it was steep, and the wet leaves made it slick as glass. I tumbled hard, bumping and twisting until I slammed against a muddy patch near the water's edge. Everything hurt. Again. But this time, I couldn't get up. I tried, and my ankle gave out. The pain was white-hot. I collapsed, gasping. And then, Bear was there, again, bursting through the brush with a wildness I hadn't seen in him before. His eyes were wild, his ears pinned back. He rushed to my side, nosed at my shoulder, then my face. "I'm okay," I tried to say, but the words came out broken. He paced around me, whimpering, then circled back. I thought he'd try to help, me stand like before, but he didn't. Instead, he barked. Loud, urgent, again, and again. I blinked up at him. "What are you doing?" Another bark, and then he was gone. He bolted up the slope, through the trees, gone like a shot. Panic laced through me. Was he leaving? Was he going for help? What if he didn't come back? I lay there shaking, heart pounding, staring at the sky between branches. Minutes passed, or hours, I couldn't tell. Then, cracking branches, footsteps, and a voice. "Hello? Hello?" A woman's voice. I turned my head and saw her. Early 40s, flannel shirt, blonde braid, eyes wide with concern. Bear was beside her, panting. She dropped to her knees beside me. "Oh my God, are you hurt?" I nodded. "My ankle." "I'm Elise," she said gently. "Elise Marlowe." The name hit like a stone. Elise. The flyer. I looked from her, to Bear. He stood still beside her, but his body leaned toward me. His eyes were locked on mine. "You found him," she said softly, brushing her fingers across Bear's neck. I swallowed hard. "He found me." She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "He disappeared after the fire. Our home burned, down 6 months ago. He ran. I searched for weeks. But I guess he went looking for something safer." I stared at her. She looked kind. She didn't look like someone who would hurt him. "He saved my life," I said. She looked at Bear, who stepped toward me and nudged my hand. "He's done that before," she murmured, "more than once." With Elise's help, I got back to the cabin. She brought a splint from her truck, helped wrap my ankle, even made tea while I rested. Bear stayed close, resting his chin on the couch beside me. He doesn't usually bond. "This fast," she said, watching the way Bear followed my every move. "He's loyal, but he's slow to trust." I nodded. "So am I," she smiled. "I saw your flyer," I admitted. "I didn't call." "That's okay," she said gently. "He found you for a reason." I looked down at him. He was watching me again. Always watching. Do you want him back? Elise was quiet. Then slowly she shook her head. I want him to be where he's happy. And I don't think that's with me anymore. We both lost. Something in that fire. I think he's trying to start over too. Tears pricked my eyes. He can stay. If he wants to, she said. But it's not really up to me. Bear stood, walked over to me, and gently laid his head in my lap. The next morning, Elise was gone. She'd left before sunrise, quiet and respectful, with a thermos of coffee on the porch and a handwritten note tucked under a river stone. Thank you for loving him like I did. He chooses where he belongs now. I held the note for a long time, rereading the same line until the words blurred. He chooses. Bear lay stretched out by the fire, chest slowly rising and falling. He looked peaceful, but different somehow. Something in his posture had shifted since Elise came. Like a weight had lifted from his back, or perhaps simply settled in a new place. You picked me, I whispered, crouching next to him. Are you sure about that? He didn't open his eyes, but his tail thumped once against the wooden floor. That day felt like a fragile dream, the kind you wake from and try to go back to, but the edges are already fading. The pain in my ankle had dulled, and I could move around with only a slight limp. The air outside had turned sharp, hinting at snow, and Bear trailed behind me wherever I went, always within reach. Still, I felt unsettled, like something was watching, or waiting. That feeling only grew when I spotted the car. It was parked just outside the tree line, black, shiny, new, completely out of place on the rough mountain road. I froze on the porch, staring at it through the trees. No one got out. Bear stiffened beside me. Who is that? I murmured. He let out a low, warning growl. I backed up toward the cabin door, heart pounding. Inside, I whispered, and he followed without question. Once inside, I peered through the window. The car hadn't moved. Its windows were dark. Tinted, impenetrable. After 10 minutes, it backed away slowly and vanished down the path without a sound. But the chill it left behind lingered. That night, I couldn't sleep. The shadows inside the cabin felt thicker. Every creak of wood sounded like footsteps. I kept the fire going longer than usual. Bear curled tightly beside me, but even he seemed tense, ears twitching, breath shallow. I thought of Elise's story again. The fire, the disappearance, the look in Bear's eyes when he'd first found me, watchful, haunted. Was someone after him? Was he running from something? The next morning, I took Bear for a short walk along the ridge, partly for air, partly to clear the fog in my mind. The forest was brittle with frost, the trees skeletal and still. Every step crunched. We reached the overlook, and I paused to take in the view. The valley stretched out below like a painting. But Bear didn't look at it. He was staring into the trees, tense, alert. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw the man. Just standing there. Mid-30s maybe. Clean-shaven. Heavy jacket. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, and he was watching us, calmly, as if he'd been doing it for a while. I felt my breath seize. Bear, I whispered. The dog let out a low growl. The man raised his hand, slow, deliberate. Not here to hurt you, he called out. His voice was even, controlled, practiced. Then why are you watching us? I called back. I'm looking for someone. A dog, actually. Large, black, scar above his eye. Goes by the name Samson. Bear bristled. The man stepped forward. He belongs to me. No, He doesn't. His face didn't change. He ran during a house fire. We've been searching for him ever since. He's trained. Valuable. Valuable? That word made my stomach turn. He's not a possession, I snapped. The man tilted his head. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. The dog too. That's when Bear lunged, not to attack, but to block me. He planted himself between me and the stranger, teeth bared, tail high, the deep rumble in his chest vibrating through the air like thunder. Easy, the man said, taking a step back. He's just reacting out of confusion. No, I said, stepping behind Bear. He's reacting to you. The man's eyes flicked to me, sharp now, assessing. Then he turned without a word and disappeared into the trees. I didn't speak for the rest of the hike back. Bear stayed close, constantly checking on me. I felt dizzy, not from exertion, but from everything slamming together in my mind. Elise's story, the stranger's calm voice, the car, the flyer, the name Samson. Was it possible Elise hadn't told me everything? Was Bear not just a dog on the run, but a dog being hunted? And if so, why? Back at the cabin, I pulled the old landline phone out of the drawer. I'd brought it for emergencies, never used it. I dialed Elise's number from the flyer. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? It's Nora, I said. Something happened. I explained everything. The man, the name Samson, the words he used. Trained. Valuable. There was a pause. Then, I was afraid this might happen. My fingers tightened around the phone. What do you mean? Bear Samson wasn't just our dog, she said softly. Before he came to us, he was trained by a private security firm. High-level obedience, tracking, even defensive aggression. But he was too sensitive for their program. They labeled him a failure. He was set to be transferred to a new handler after the fire, but he ran. I felt like the air had been knocked from my lungs. You never told me, I said quietly. I wanted him to have a clean slate, she replied, to be free. He saved my daughter from the fire, you know, dragged her out by the collar, then disappeared. I looked at Bear, at the way he sat by the fire, alert but calm, fierce, but always watching me with softness. He saved me too. I don't doubt it. What happens now? Another pause. If that man is who I think he is, he'll come back, and he won't care about your connection with Bear. He'll see him as property, as a tool. The line crackled with silence. Then she said something that chilled me. You might have to fight for him. That night, I locked the cabin, every door, every window. I sat with Bear beside the fire, one hand resting on his thick fur, my eyes on the shadows. I won't let them take you, I whispered. Not now. Not ever. Bear looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not just loyalty, but trust, complete and unconditional. He laid his head on my lap, heavy, warm, right on top of me, and I let him stay there all night. Morning came pale and silent, as if the world was holding its breath. Frost clung to the window panes. The fire had burned low during the night, casting the room in a soft orange haze. Bear still lay curled on my lap, his body a weight. I had long stopped trying to move. His breathing was slow, steady. He hadn't stirred once, neither had I. I was afraid that if I shifted, the spell would break. But it did anyway, when I heard the car again. Not just any car. The car. Black. Silent. Smooth as a shadow moving up the gravel road. My heart jumped into my throat. Bear lifted his head, then without hesitation, rose and walked to the door. "Wait," I whispered, grabbing the coat I'd left draped on the couch. "We stay inside." But Bear didn't listen. He stood at the door, tail stiff, body alert, waiting for my next move. And that's when I realized. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. The knock came 15 seconds later. A sharp, practiced rhythm. I opened the door. The man stood there again. Same face, same coat, same calm stare. But this time, his smile was thinner. "Colder?" I asked nicely. He said. Bear growled behind me, the low sound vibrating through the floorboards. "I told you he's not yours," I replied. "He's government property." "He's not property." The man's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand what he is." I stepped out, pulling the door shut behind me, heart hammering. "I understand exactly what he is. He's a soul, a protector, a survivor. He's mine." "You're obstructing a retrieval operation." "Am I?" He reached into his jacket pocket. Bear barked sharply, slamming his body against the door behind me. The sound rattled the walls. The man froze, then slowly pulled out, not a weapon, but a slip of paper, a document. "I have the paperwork," he said coolly. "Full transfer agreement. Ownership rights reverted after the fire. You're not in the legal position to refuse." He held it out. I didn't take it. Instead, I said quietly, "What happens if I don't let you take him?" He looked me in the eye and smiled. "We don't need your permission." I barely had time to react. Another figure emerged from the trees. Then another. 3 men total, walking toward the cabin like wolves circling a kill. Not aggressive, just certain. Bear barked again, louder this time, his body rigid with tension. I flung the door open. "Inside!" I cried. Bear bolted in. I followed, slamming it shut, locking every bolt I could reach. The cabin felt too small, too old, the walls too thin. Bear stood in the center, watching me, waiting. I dropped to my knees in front of him, grabbed his face, between my palms. "Do you trust me?" His tail flicked once. I ran to the back door, the one that led into the woods, unused, overgrown, but not forgotten. I threw it open. Fog drifted low along the ground. "Go," I said. Bear didn't move. "They'll take you, please go!" He stared at me and then he ran, not away, but with me. We darted through the trees, the cold air slicing my lungs. My ankle screamed, but adrenaline carried me. Bear stayed close, weaving through the underbrush like he was born of it. Behind us, shouting. Then footsteps. "They're coming," I gasped. Bear surged forward, barking once, a command. We reached the edge of the ridge where we'd stood days ago. Below was the stream, now swollen with ice melt, wild and fast. The drop was steep, too steep for me. But Bear didn't stop. He turned to face me, then ran. Off the ridge. I screamed. But it wasn't a fall. It was a leap. He landed with a splash on the muddy bank below, skidded, then turned back, barking sharply. Stared. He wanted me to jump? No, not jump. Slide. I dropped to the ground, braced my bad leg, and pushed off. The slope tore past in a blur of dirt and leaves. Pain lit my leg on fire, but I didn't stop. Not until I landed in a heap beside him. Nosed my arm, checking, always checking. "I'm okay," I gasped. "Keep moving." We disappeared into the trees. It took us an hour to loop back around. An hour of hiding, dodging, crawling. When we reached the cabin again, the car was gone. The men too. But the door hung open, broken at the hinge. The living room was torn apart. drawers. Spilled, fireplace tools scattered. They'd searched it, and they'd be back. I knew then. We couldn't stay. Not here. Not anymore. That night I packed what I could. Blankets, food, first aid, Bear's water bowl, Elise's note, and the flyer, the one that had started it all. Bear never left my side, not even for a second. As I zipped the bag shut, I turned to him. You ready for a new start? He blinked slowly. I took that as a yes. We left before sunrise, no goodbyes, no notes. Just the quiet tread of paws and boots across frozen ground. I didn't know where we were going, but I knew what we were leaving behind. Fear, loss, hiding. We were done with that. Weeks passed, then months. We found another cabin. This one tucked deep into a national forest, farther from roads, deeper into silence. I worked odd jobs online, tended to a garden, read books I'd always meant to finish. Bear ran through the woods like he owned them, and at night, he slept beside me, head on my lap, heart against mine. We weren't hiding anymore. We were living. Together. One evening, a letter arrived. No address. Just a folded paper tucked into the screen door. No one's looking anymore. You're safe now. Keep him close. He's always known where he belongs. I read it 3 times before I let the tears come. Bear leaned into me, silent and steady. No, I whispered. I know. Now I tell people my story. Not everyone believes it. That's fine. They ask me why I trust a dog with my life, and I tell them. Because when I fell, he didn't run. He got on top of me. He shielded me. He stayed, and when the world came for him, he chose me. That kind of love? You don't leave that behind. Not for anything. Not even for the past.